The title on the new PowerPoint is called Toward an Oregon Supplemental Poverty Measure. Rather than Oregon as a new entrant, because Oregon really is not a new entrant yet. Oregon is an aspirant to developing a poverty measure. And I'm very excited to be at this meeting because a lot of the decisions that we're going to be having to make have been discussed here. And we're in Oregon much better prepared to start this than we were 2 days ago. I'd like to acknowledge the two people that I'm going to be working with on the team that we've put together to do this, Deanna Groby and David Rothwell, both are faculty members at OSU. So, as I've said, we're not yet a new entrant. We're here to learn, and we're looking for partners, collaborators, and in fact, funders to help us to get this work done. And I'd like to make the case, though, that Oregon is very, very interested in this and has both a long history of doing collaborative work within the state with the administrative agencies and good access to administrative data that I'll go through in a minute. So I want to make the case that Oregon is prepared. I want to show you a little bit of the administrative data that we have, and which is household panel data linking covered wages, unemployment, insurance benefits, and program selected safety net program benefits as well. And we have this over a long period of time, and that this will help us, I think, put together a supplemental poverty measure when we are able to start. And my last slide is the issues that I had identified before coming down here that we will need to get through, and I think we've gone through most of these issues, so the last slide will just be a summary of our next task when we get this started. Oregon has a long history of interest in indicators, indicators of poverty as a guide to policymaking, going back at least 25 years to the creation of the Oregon Progress Board in 1989 as a state agency, which identified 100 indicators that they wanted to move toward. They set goals and they were tracking progress for the 20 years that the agency existed. The agency was defunded in 2009, and after that, the Oregon Community Foundation stepped up to sort of put together what we've called the TOP Indicators Project, the Tracking Oregon's Progress Indicators Project, which is continuing to some extent the work that the Progress Board started. It includes a poverty measure. I'd love it to include a supplemental poverty measure at some point. The Community Action Partnership of Oregon, which is our community action agency networking group, contracted with OSU in 2013 to start developing things that they could use to indicate what the impact of the work is that they do. One of the things that we explored at that point was the cost of developing a supplemental poverty measure in Oregon, and we used the Wisconsin graph that showed the impact that Tim just showed us, which showed what impact taxes had and all of the various subsidies. And I used that graph to show people in Oregon what we could do if we had this, and the CAP agencies at least funded our initial exploration into what it would cost to do this. And they're going to be working with me to get funding to actually implement this at some point. Oregon Business Council has released a report about the same time on Path to Prosperity. They had a part of it which noted that we can't really measure the impact of things on poverty. Other groups, Institute of Portland Metro Studies did a self-sufficiency measure in 2014. The governor sponsored a prosperity design laboratory, which I know some people here were at, which actually looked at different strategies for reducing poverty in Oregon. They identified the lack of a supplemental poverty measure as a barrier to their work and called for a definition of prosperity that would recognize the deficits that are associated with different kinds of poverty. And finally, last legislative session, our legislature introduced a bill, one of the legislators, to in fact create a task force that would look at measurement of social and economic success. And one of their charges was to develop something about look at what other states had done and to then develop a recommended poverty measure. The Senate Bill 890 did not pass, but there's continuing interest. The legislator that sponsored it is still in the legislature, and we'll bring it up at the next, I'm sure at the next legislative session. I guess the final point I'd like to make is sort of our aspirations is that we do have very good access, the state to administrative data to help actually implement a supplemental poverty measure. Oregon is as a Western state is very trusting, and the people in the agencies who manage the data believe that the data should be used and are very generous about giving access to that data to people who want to do research. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the administrative data and then show you the people in this room do not need to be reminded about how chaotic the lives of low-income populations are. But I think one of the things that we've learned at looking at this administrative data is how very variable their income streams are and their program participation. And I've got a couple slides which will just demonstrate both what we can learn from that data and the challenges that we face in trying to put together a poverty measure. Okay, so as part of a project that was a cooperative agreement with Economic Research Service in Washington, D.C., looking at SNAP participation, we were able to put together a linked data set with the Oregon Department of Human Services, their integrated client services warehouse, which has that monthly data on SNAP and other program, both the participation and the amounts from administrative records that go back at least to 2005. Our data went back to 2005. Others it's possible to go back earlier than that. And the Oregon Employment Department, of course, has quarterly data on covered wages in employment and unemployment insurance benefits. And we were able to link those two data sets with Social Security numbers. They gave us unique identifiers for us to use on cases. It's basically a SNAP caseload. There are 50,000 entrants. It's an intake sample, so we have an inflow of 50,000 new SNAP recipients aged 19 to 59 that entered the program in either 2005, well, both 2005 and 2009. We have two cohorts. And we looked primarily because of our interest in linking with work at non-disabled household heads. But these records include the work and the program participation of other household members. So we know we have a SNAP household. We don't have an SPM unit, but we have a SNAP household that we would have to then link or somehow integrate with the other ACS data. So this graphic is just an attempt to illustrate the chaotic life that in a hypothetical case, but not atypical case for our caseload and it's SNAP participation is the top two bars. The work experience and the unemployment insurance benefits are in the middle column there, and then the medical assistance program is at the bottom in the red line. But if you start, so our case here, our hypothetical case starts in January of 2009, and you can see that this person, this household, a single mother with a daughter, had received SNAP during 25 out of the 36 months. In some cases, the child was on the case, and in some cases, the child was off. And again, the lives of those households mean that children move in and out, and sometimes they're on the caseload and sometimes not. And so she had basically 3 spells interrupted by times when she had full-time employment. You can see in the green bars in the middle, you can see the number of hours worked per quarter. So the top set of bars is monthly SNAP participation. The middle set of bars, the green, are the work and the unemployment insurance that this mother received. The top line shows the number of hours per quarter worked. So you can see she was starting at either got a job about most way through the first quarter or was working 20 hours a week or 10 hours a week, I guess, during that first quarter, and then worked up to full time. So she was working during 9 of the 12 quarters, but variable hours over that time, and received SNAP during the early part, and then when she went to full time, ceased to do it. Had 7 jobs during that 3-year period. The little narrow green bars are different jobs. The different colors indicate she had different jobs during that time. Sometimes 2 jobs during a quarter, sometimes 1. And then the bottom, the yellow line in the middle just shows unemployment insurance. When she's lost her job, she had 2 unemployment insurance spells. We know what those benefits were during that time, and are able to basically construct a household budget for her during this time. But the basic point here is that both program participation and work are very erratic and sporadic. She was on medical assistance early on and then did not go on after she had she got a pretty good job later on. But the second and last of the slides with the administrative data shows how her cash income during that period, which is the green and the yellow. The green is wages, the yellow is unemployment insurance, and then the orange is the SNAP payments. And so the point here is that she went from very low wages to about twice the poverty, 3 times the poverty level over the first 4 quarters of her entry into this program. Then lost a job, started to get unemployment insurance for most of that next year, finally got a job the last quarter of that next year, which actually moved her out of poverty in the following quarter. But the point here is mostly that income, that unemployment insurance did in fact move her out of no income during the year she was unemployed, got her fairly close to the poverty line in some cases, and that SNAP almost filled the gap in a couple of these cases. So that's the official poverty threshold there, not a supplemental poverty threshold. But this is my next to the last slide. I've just been given 3 minutes, and so I'm ready to close out here. But I guess this is just it's this kind of data that we're going to have to match with the ACS data, and the question of whether we do this on an annual basis, which is of course the standard and the most probably easy way to start on this. I'll always be a little bit uncomfortable that we've missed some of the chaos in their lives by doing that, but at the same time, I think we will be able to use this data and link it in a way that allows us to do a poverty measure. So these, again, are the as I was coming down on the plane, I thought these are the things that I need to think through, that we need to get straight, and I've learned from you during this last couple of days ways that we can handle both the defining the measurement units. We're starting with, well, anyway, we'll put together the resource unit, things we have to do to get the poverty threshold right, and how we might do some geographic adjustments. And then, how, of course, the administrative data will help us with the underreporting, and this question of frequency of poverty measurement. I'm sure we'll start out annual just because it's the way we should start, but we'll always have in the back of our mind the chaos of these lives. Anyway, Oregon is not yet ready to have done anything, but we are very anxious to start and very grateful for the counsel you've given us during this time. Thank you.